If you're trying to fix your rotator cuff or shoulder pain and avoid a surgical procedure, you're in the right place because I'm gonna show you some of the best exercises you could do for your shoulder complex to get this fixed. What's going on, guys? Dr. Nick Bonforte here to go over how to solve your shoulder pain. Specifically, really trying to bias the rotator cuff complex in this video. I'll be demonstrating the exercises and there'll be timestamps below. If you want to skip ahead just to view the exercises, do that. If you want to stick around for an explanation or rationalization of how I'm doing the exercises, why we're doing the exercises, that will be after I perform the exercise. If you don't want that, feel free, skip right ahead, just do the exercises. Now, real quick, before we dive into the exercises, we have to understand the shoulder complex. The shoulder complex, specifically the rotator cuff, is involved with 4 muscles. Supraspinatus on the top of your shoulder, the subscapularis muscle on the inside of your shoulder, and we have 2 on the back, the teres minor and the infraspinatus. Now, these are crucial for joint congruency, joint stability, and when the rotator cuff muscles aren't functioning as well, that's when it can lead to a lot of issues. So we're gonna be focusing on those 4 rotator cuff muscles, trying to bias them a little bit better and hopefully help out your shoulder. So let's get to it. Guys, so with this first exercise, we're trying to bias really the shoulder external rotators. Now, the idea is we have the band on our wrists, and the band resistance is going to be very dependent on how it's actually allowing you to perform the exercise with correct form. You don't want your elbows flaring out, your arms collapsing in, you don't want your wrists bending backwards. Those are all form compensations. You want to keep your forearms parallel to each other as you go up throughout the motion. You want to emphasize with this exercise, as you're going up, not to just raise your arms up and down like so. You want to think about making almost like a C type of motion or a U type of motion actually when you're pushing with your elbow. So you're thinking of making a U type of motion with your elbow as you raise your arms up. That will emphasize your rotator cuff muscles to really engage and bias them a little bit more versus just raising your arms up and down. And then keeping your forearms parallel to each other really engages them, because if they were to collapse in, your rotator cuff muscles would quote unquote shut off. So that's the idea. With this, we want to get reps, 3 sets, 12 to 15, maybe even higher, 20 reps. The idea is to get more input and strategically bias these crucial muscles at the rotator cuff complex. So guys, the reason I like that exercise a lot, and I prescribe it all the time, it is really good and it could do a lot of wonders if it's done correctly. Unfortunately, a lot of times people just view that as, oh, it's too simple, but they do it completely wrong. So if you do it right, it can really give you some huge dividends in results, but you just got to do it right consistently for a period of time. So with this one, I like this so much because as the band is on your wrists, and as you go up into the motion, when your forearms are parallel to each other, that is really biasing the rotator cuff external rotators. Because if they were not on, the arms would collapse inward, right? So you're really biasing those areas versus the classic one when you have the band and you're just going like this by the side. You can really use your shoulder to shrug during that motion and you're not emphasizing it. And a lot of times people just go too heavy and they call on other muscles to help out. The idea is to really try to bias those muscles of the rotator cuff, teres minor, infraspinatus, the external rotators, to really emphasize work being done there. So with this, it also plays a role into activating other muscles such as the serratus anterior. If you remember when I went over the review of how to do the exercise, you want to think about a U shape of motion when you're doing this, pushing with your elbow. When you do that, you emphasize the serratus to bring your shoulder blade up like so, and that also engages that muscle really well. And all that is important for just overhead motion. That is the reason I love that exercise, to really bias the rotator cuff muscles in that overhead position. All right, so with this exercise, we're taking a band or a cable, you could use a cable machine, and you wanna get it to the side of your body. Now with this, there's multiple components to this, and the idea is to target the rotator cuff through a range of motion, and we're gonna be obviously targeting other muscles, but the idea is to bias the rotator cuff muscles through a range of motion. So with this, we're gonna be doing 2 essential components before the raise, and the 2 are, you go into shoulder external rotation, you pause for a second, and then you push out, and then you raise up. The idea is to really just preset that shoulder in a way that it's targeting the rotator cuff to engage before we raise up. So the idea now, having the band trying to pull us apart, we engage more of our muscles as we go up. Now through that exercise, you want to make sure the elbow is staying locked out straight. You keep your thumb, envision your thumb being up as you go up. You don't want your thumb down or in. And as you go up, pointing up. That will put the shoulder more into an external rotated position, more optimal for shoulder mechanics. With this, since it's activation and lower level strength, reps is important with this. 3 sets, 4 sets of 12, 15, maybe even 20. The idea is to really get a burner with this versus extreme load and 8 reps. That's more of a strength block. This is more activation, more input into this one. All right guys, so for this one, I love this one to do because it gives you more input through a range of motion. You have to create more mind-body connection of how your arm's moving through space. Now, a lot of times with shoulder issues, we're moving through compensations, whether that's from a strength perspective or a mobility perspective. Now, for this specific exercise, we're focusing on more of that strength activation component. Now, with this, I love the idea of having the band pulling us to the side, because the idea is if the arm is out in space throughout it, it's trying to get pulled across your body. Now, why is that relevant or important? Because if it's getting pulled across your body, you have to use your shoulder complex to actually stabilize it through a range of motion. It's almost like a rhythmic stabilization or perturbations as you're going up in space. And it gives you some of that reactionary standpoint from a muscular standpoint to keep your shoulder and your arm in a steady part of a motion. So that's why I really like this particular exercise, to help bias it at a low level idea. And the idea is you're getting other things involved as you go through the motion. So yes, we're getting the rotator cuff as we go into that external rotated position and we punch out. We're trying to bias the cuff a little bit more, but then as we raise up, other muscles are obviously involved to raise your arm up in space. So that is a little bit more of an in-depth analysis of why I really like that particular exercise at particular stages when you're trying to solve some shoulder issues. So with this exercise, this is the banded A row. So with this, you wanna make sure your arms stay locked out, your palms face forward, and the idea is to make sure you're up nice and tall. So your arms start out in front of you, you keep them locked out, palms up, stay up nice and tall, and then think about using all of your back muscles, your shoulder, maybe even a little bit of your lat, to really pull your arms back to the side of your body. As you do that, you could also think of a good cue of just puffing out your chest. That will emphasize more of a good posture throughout this exercise. So you puff out the chest as you pull, emphasize the back muscles working. And with this, I like reps as well. So we're going higher reps, 12 reps, 15 reps, 20 reps, and it could be ranging from 3 sets to 4 sets. Now the idea is we're getting more reps here, one, because it works on postural muscles as well, and that needs more input. And then 2, you're really just trying to get more input into the entire system versus from a strength loaded perspective here. So it's just waking things up, low level strength and stabilization versus like a 300-pound chest press here. So we're just getting input into the system. Now with this exercise, you wanna keep in mind making sure form is correct with this. A lot of times when you get fatigued, you'll start to bend the elbows when you're doing this. The palms will start to dip down. You wanna keep your elbows locked out the whole time and your palms facing forward as you do this particular exercise. Also keep in mind when you get fatigued, not to just slouch forward. So the idea of having that good mind-body connection to stay upright, puff out that chest as you pull, because when we get fatigued and lazy, it's very easy just to go like this and round into it. So make sure you stay up nice and tall, have good posture throughout it. So I love this exercise because it has multiple factors to this. Now with this, a lot of times when you have shoulder issues or shoulder pain, sometimes it hurts to bring your arm overhead. So this is a good option to use if that's the case, and then really target the shoulder complex and other muscles really effectively while not making it more angry as you just try to push overhead and it hurts. So the idea with this is when you do an A row in this case, the idea is, I'm taking it from, is studies that have been shown when you're lying face down and you bring your arm straight backwards, that has been shown from EMG activity to target the lower trap. Now, why is that important? The lower trap has a function on the shoulder blade to upwardly rotate it. Why is that important? When you raise your arm overhead, your shoulder has to upwardly rotate. Why is that important? So that your shoulder could actually function better. So with this one, when you're doing this, you're not pissing it off if it hurts to bring yourself overhead, and you're biasing things like the lower trap to actually help you ultimately get the shoulder functioning better. And the idea with more reps and more input, it gives itself more time to understand and learn how to function and how to activate into this concepts of these muscles working. So that is the idea that I like to use with that particular exercise. With the push-up, it depends on what stage you're in, but if you're in the earlier stages, I like more reps to teach the body that it's okay to go through a motion. Because sometimes when we're dealing with shoulder pain or issues, we're concerned with movements we could do, so we avoid it. But teaching your body to go through a motion is good. So reps can vary here. I like either 3 sets or 4 sets, 10 to 15, especially in the beginnings. But as you go more into like a strength block, you could definitely change that up where you go maybe 4 sets of 8 or 6, where you're adding more load. But the idea in the beginning is to get the body used to this motion. Now I'm demonstrating it on an angled position, but if you need to go to a full push-up, great. Now the idea is form with this. A lot of times people just go way too fast performing a push-up and really do it wrong. You want to make sure you're slowing things down and performing it well, because it could be a very good foundational one to build some shoulder strength. So with this, I'm in an angled position. We want to really track the elbows in a 45-degree angle as you're going down. So you want it going down to the side of your body versus having your elbows just flared out to the side like so, and it just puts the shoulder in some compromised positions. So the idea with creating functionality into this movement in a push-up, we have to engage our rotator cuff muscles to stabilize the shoulder joint as we're going through this position and through this motion. So it's good functionality throughout it. Now also keep in mind with this is body position, whether you're in an angled position or a regular push-up. You want to maintain a good stabilization factor throughout the whole body, and think about the whole body as being like 2 cans. One is the upper body being a can and the pelvis being upper can. You want to make sure they're stacked together as a unit as you're going down. A lot of times when people get fatigued, they'll just sag into it, and then it creates inefficiencies throughout the push-up. So make sure we're emphasizing the forearm, which is in the elbow position, and then also the body throughout this motion, and you go into a position that you feel like it's a challenge. If you start with an angled position, great. If you need to go to a regular push-up, great. But the idea is if you're probably watching this, it might be painful to go into a full push-up at this moment. So doing a modified angle is good throughout this. All right, so with the classic push-up, I like this from a functionality standpoint. Now in this one, I just demonstrated on an angled position, but obviously if it's too easy, you go to a lowered position. The main thing with this is really things you want to focus on is form throughout it. Now why I like it is because it's a functional movement, it's multi-joint, and it's also weight bearing, so it stabilizes your shoulder, it gets some compressive forces into your shoulder, that creates good reception from mechanoreceptors and things like that in the joint. So it gives you some input, and it also stabilizes your shoulder as you're going through this functional movement. Now also with form, the form of keeping the elbows more on this 45-degree angle versus having them flared out like this is because more common than not, people just lack range of motion. Why? Because of a buildup of years of not working on it. And when we put our arms up like this and we try to perform a push-up, we're performing it on a less than optimal foundation. So the idea is just more safe to keep your elbows and tracking on that 45-degree angle. It works more optimal. So the push-up is great to incorporate from a functionality standpoint, just to get it moving through a multi-dynamic type of motion through multiple joints. Also has the idea of being in a weight-bearing position. You're using your body weight. You're not putting some weight and holding weight. So it's good from a variety of standpoints where you're not having too many variables and you're in control of what you can actually do throughout this push-up. All right, so there you go. I hope you did learn some things throughout this video and get some insight on how you want to address the rotator cuff from an isolated standpoint where we try to bias the rotator cuff all the way going into a functionality type of movement like the push-up. Now, is this the end all be all? These are the only exercises you should do? Of course not. There's things that you want to do and progress from. As an example, in the push-up in the beginning stages, they're going to be lower reps, but you could definitely progress up to making it more of a strength focus, a strength block, versus just getting your body okay with the movement. So it's the concepts to really understand throughout this, and the exercises can be very, very good in terms of getting the shoulder at bay, lowering the discomfort, lower the pain, getting input into it so that you can build off of this. So hopefully you did gain some value and insight throughout this. If you did find value in this video, I'd greatly appreciate it if you subscribe down below to my channel, like this video, leave any comments down below, and I will see you on the next one.